Let us begin with a question that appears simple, almost instinctive, and yet becomes increasingly difficult the more carefully we examine it. Where did everything come from? Not just life, not just Earth, not just the stars or galaxies, but everything, the totality of existence, the universe itself. In most modern discourses, the most common answer is the Big Bang, a scientific model describing the early expansion of the universe from an extraordinarily hot, dense state approximately 13.8 billion years ago. This model is supported by a range of empirical observations such as the cosmic microwave background radiation, the redshift of distant galaxies, and the distribution of light elements such as hydrogen and helium. But while the Big Bang explains how the universe evolved, it does not fully resolve the deeper philosophical question: what does it mean for the universe to begin? Because the moment we say the universe began, we import all our human assumptions drawn from everyday experiences, assumptions that may not necessarily apply at all. In our everyday life, beginnings are straightforward. A building begins when construction starts. A human life begins at birth. A book begins on its first page. These are events that occur within time and space. They have a location, a sequence, and a context. But the universe is not an object within time and space. It is believed it is the very system from which time and space emerge. And this creates a conceptual difficulty. If time itself begins with the universe, then asking what happened before the universe is not just difficult, it becomes meaningless. The word before assumes time. Without time, there is no temporal framework within which before could have existed. This is analogous to asking to what lies north of the North Pole. The question appears coherent but collapses upon examination because north is defined in relation to the Earth's geometry. Beyond the North Pole, the concept loses any reference. In the same way, before the universe becomes a linguistic construction that has no actual reference. So this suggests that the problem may not be a lack of answers, but a mismatch between the kinds of questions we are asking and the nature of the reality we are trying to comprehend. Rather than thinking of the universe as something that began in the same way objects begin, it may be more accurate to think of it as a continuous process, something that is not simply an event in time, but the very condition that where time exists. From a scientific perspective, this aligns with how modern physics increasingly describes our reality. At fundamental levels, the universe is not composed of static things, but of fields, interactions, and probabilities. Quantum field theory, for example, does not describe particles as solid objects, but as excitations in underlying fields, creating dynamic, fluctuating patterns of energy. Even at microscopic scales, what appears stable is, upon closer inspection, constantly changing. Atoms vibrate, molecules interact, biological systems continuously exchange matter and energy with their surroundings. This brings us to an important shift in our perspective. What we perceive as things may be better understood as processes. So if you consider a flame, for example, at first glance it appears to be a distant object, something you can point at and identify. But what is it actually? Flame is not a fixed entity. It is a process, a chemical reaction involving fuel, oxygen, and heat. The visible shape of the flame is a temporary pattern, sustained by continuous transformation between matter, gas, liquid, solid. Or consider a whirlpool in a river. It has a recognizable form and pattern. You can observe it, return to it, and identify it again. Yet none of the water composed in the whirlpool remains the same. It is not a static object, but a stable pattern within the same flow. In both cases, what appears to be a thing is in fact an ongoing activity, an ongoing cycle of matter, a process that involves different matter every billionth of a second. Now extend this understanding to the universe as a whole. Rather than imagining it as a collection of objects assembled into a particular movement, we might consider it as a vast, interconnected process, a continuous unfolding of energy and structure across multiple scales. From the formation of galaxies to the dynamics of ecosystems, from neural connectivity in the brain to the movement of subatomic particles, the universe appears less like a machine composed of fixed parts and more like a dynamic system in constant transformation. At this point, the discussion becomes more than philosophical, it becomes personal. Because if the universe is fundamentally in a process, then everything within it, including what we call ourselves, or the self, must also be understood in those terms of continual cycle of matter and processes. And yet this is not how we ordinarily think. We tend to regard ourselves as discrete, stable entities. We say things like, I am this person, as though there is a fixed identity underlying that experience. But when we examine this more closely, the picture becomes less clear. Your body is not static. Cells are continuously replaced. 40 to 50,000 cells per minute are thought to shed from you. The atoms that compose your body are exchanged with the environment through respiration, digestion, and metabolism. Over time, the material composition of your body changes significantly. Your thoughts are not fixed. They arise, shift, and disappear. Emotions fluctuate. Perceptions change depending on context and your attention. Even memory, which gives a sense of continuity, is not a perfect record, but a reconstructive process that changes all the time. So where, within this constant change, is the stable self? The answer is that there is no self, but the self may not be what we assume it to be. Instead of a fixed object, the self may be better understood as a pattern of activity, a dynamic organization of biological, psychological, and social processes. This is consistent with perspectives in neuroscience, where consciousness is not located in a single point, but arises from distributed activity across neural networks. It also consistent with systems theory, which emphasizes relationships and interactions over isolated components. Now, this leads to a further insight. We often say, I came into this world, as though we are separate entities inserted into an already existing environment. But from a process-based perspective, it may be more accurate to say that we came out of the world, as famously quoted through Alan Watts. Just as a leaf emerges from a tree or a wave arises from the ocean, human beings emerge from the same processes that can constitute the environment, because we're made up of the exact same matter, the same elements of the periodic table. The distinction between an organism and the environment is real in a functional sense, but not absolute in an ontological sense. There is continuous exchange, continuous interaction, continuous dependency, and a continuous exchange in matter. This challenges the deeply ingrained assumption of separation. We tend to divide reality into categories: self and other, inside and outside, subjective and objective, subject and object. These distinctions are useful. They allow us to navigate the world, communicate, and organize knowledge. But they are simplifications of reality. They are models, and like all models, they highlight certain aspects of reality while obscuring others. The risk arises when we mistake the model for the reality itself. When we take the conceptual boundary between self and the world as an absolute division, we overlook the underlying continuity. For example, breathing is not an isolated action performed by a separate individual. It is a process involving both the organism and the environment. Oxygen enters, carbon dioxide exits. The boundary is not fixed. It is a preamble and dynamic process. Very similarly, perception is not a one-way observation of an external world. It is an interaction between sensory systems and environmental stimulation. In this sense, what we call experience is not located solely within the individual, nor solely in the environment, but arises from that relationship. This brings us back to the original question of beginnings. If the universe is an ongoing process, and we are part of that process, then the idea of a single definitive beginning becomes less central. It is not that the Big Bang is irrelevant. It provides a powerful model of early cosmic conditions, but philosophically, the emphasis has to shift. The universe is not just something that began in the past, it is something that is continuously happening, and the same is true of you. You are not a finished object that exists independently of everything else. You are an event, a process unfolding in time. Your body, your thoughts, your perceptions, your actions are all part of a continuous interaction with the wider system, the elements of the universe. This perspective does not remove individuality, it reframes it. Instead of being an isolated unit, individuality becomes a particular expression of a broader process, a unique configuration within a larger pattern. And from this standpoint, the question changes. It is no longer simply, where did I come from? Because the origin is not just in the past, it is the present. It is ongoing. The more relevant question becomes, what is happening here and now, and how is my body undergoing through all these processes and exchanging the elements of the periodic table in my physical existence? What is this process of which I am a part of? How does it move? How does it change? How do I relate to it? No one has ever answered these questions. Because whatever the ultimate origin of the universe may be, it is not separate from the present moment. It is not something that has ceased. It is something that continues through every interaction, through every form transformation, every emergence of form and awareness. And in that sense, the beginning is not something that happened once and then it is over. It is something that is happening continuously and has been for billions of years. But what happened before that billion-year count? No one has ever answered that. Through the unfolding of the universe, through the process of life, and through the experience you are having right now, not as something outside of you, but as something you are inseparable of, which is why, in the deepest sense, the beginning never truly began. It has always been in existence. It's just humans don't have any answers for what happened before.